Hey there, YouTube, and welcome back to another Utility Sports video. And today we're going to be talking about our Western Conference standings predictions. We are just a few short days away here from the resumption of the NBA season. Obviously, the preseason started December 11th, and we're closing in on the December 22nd start date. So if you guys are excited, make sure to hit that subscribe button to keep up with more of the NBA's latest news and coverage. Here at Utility Sports, we've been growing rather quickly, and we'd love to have you a part of our crew here of subscribers. So jumping into it here, let's take a look at the top 6 seeds. Now you might be wondering why we're starting with only the first six. I'll explain that in a minute. Number one, I have the Los Angeles Lakers taking the number 1 seed. They obviously just won the championship. They were the 1 seed in the West last year. And now at this point, they're going to come back. They're my favorite to repeat. They improved their roster mightily. I think Rob Pelinka could possibly be Executive of the Year. And I think that a LeBron James, Anthony Davis duo is going to be hard to overcome in the playoffs or in the regular season and the playoffs, I guess. Obviously, something that could play a wrinkle into this is if stars rest a little bit, they could find themselves maybe fall down to 2 or 3. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't think it's too impactful what seed they are when it comes to playoff time, but I do see them as the one. Looking at number 2 there, some of you might disagree with this, but I have the Los Angeles Clippers. I think they're actually better this year than they were last year. They added Serge Ibaka to replace Montrezl Harrell. Now, obviously, I think Harrell's a better individual player, but I think Serge Ibaka is a much better team defender, gives them a little bit more of that true rim protection, something they really needed. He also stretches the floor at a more consistent rate than Montrezl Harrell was able to do. He'll be able to play alongside of Ivica Zubac, and he'll also be able to play at the center position when Zubac is off the floor. He has experience playing with Kawhi Leonard, and they also added Luke Kennard, a player that I've been really high on when he was in Detroit. I thought that the Detroit Pistons gave up on him a little bit too early. Obviously, they brought in Sadiq Bey with that move, so it wasn't too bad of a deal for them. But I think the Clippers moving Shamet for Luke Kennard was a real improvement. I think he's more of a quality defender, a little bit more able to get his own shot off. And I think that's something that's going to be valuable when Kawhi and PG find themselves on the bench or, resting during the regular season. And I think down the stretch of games, too, he could be a go-to guy for them, something that they needed to add into their offense, into the half court, I think. And he gives them a little bit of that flexibility as a spot-up shooter as well. Looking at number 3 here, the team that beat the LA Clippers, I have the Denver Nuggets. Obviously, very impressive in the bubble last year. They finished the 3rd seed in the West last year as well. And I kind of see them sticking here at the 3 seed. Right now, I've got the 1 through 3 in the exact same order. The Nuggets are going to be a really good team. Jamal Murray's going to take another step forward, I feel. Jokic is cementing himself as one of the top big men in the league, obviously, and one of the best passing big men of all time. I think the Jeremy Grant loss will hurt them a little bit, although I think he got overpaid. But I do think that they'll miss him. Obviously, they were able to bring in Zeke Naji and also RJ Hampton in the draft, 2 athletic players that'll help them in a few different ways, but I think they're, a little too young to really, push them into that 1 or 2 seed. I think Michael Porter Jr. will take steps forward. I think we'll see a little bit more of Bol this year. And all around, I think that the Nuggets are going to be a really good team. And essentially, I think they're a contender, even though I have them 3 here. It doesn't mean that they can't be a Western Conference Finals team. They did it last year. They could possibly do it again this year. I wouldn't rule that out. I think that they really need to add a perimeter defender. They failed to get Drew Holiday via trade. We're going to have to see Gary Harris and Will Barton really take a step up on the defensive end of the floor this year for them, but it is possible. Jumping into 4, I have the Dallas Mavericks, and this might be the highest you see them in a standings prediction. It's a little early maybe to have them this high, but Luka Doncic is going to be one of the best players in the league this year, in my opinion. I believe he was one of the best players in the league last year. If they get a healthy Kristaps Porzingis come the middle of January, I definitely think this is possible. You're looking at 2 top 20 players in the world with those 2 when they're healthy. Kristaps Porzingis, when Luka didn't play last year, was averaging nearly 30. In the bubble, he averaged 30 points a game. The guy's an absolute beast. He's getting healthy. And when he is healthy, the Mavericks are going to be a force to be reckoned with. I think Luka Doncic in the beginning month of the season is going to have a little bit of a tough road ahead of him. They got some tough games like the Phoenix Suns. In Phoenix, they have both of the Clippers and the Lakers in LA. So those are going to be tough starting matchups. But I think if the Mavericks can come out of those games pretty strong, I think Luka Doncic has a good shot of putting the Mavericks in the top 4 and getting them a first-round home playoff series. Now at 5, I have the Texas counterpart to the Dallas Mavericks, the Houston Rockets. And I know some of you might be thinking this is incredibly high. How could you have them this high? Harden doesn't even want to be there. I understand it. And I'm really tentative about putting them here. I'm nervous. If James Harden got traded today, they'd no longer be my 5 seed prediction. Okay. They would be out of the playoffs probably. But I like John Wall next to James Harden. I think that he's a defensive improvement over Russell Westbrook. I also like the Boogie Cousins addition. I think that he gives him a little bit of floor spacing, another passing threat out of the post, something that he's really underrated at. But more than anything, the addition I love for them is Christian Wood, another Detroit Piston departure. And I think Christian Wood's going to be extremely valuable for the Houston Rockets, especially under new head coach Steven Silas. Coming from Rick Carlisle's coaching tree, he's going to really utilize a heavy pick and roll ISO setting. And James Harden is one of the best, if not the best, pick and roll guard in the league. And you gave him a really, really lethal guard or a lethal forward screen pairing with Christian Wood, an athletic freak, a guy who can roll, catch lobs, face up in the mid-range post area. And I think he's going to be a really, really exciting player to watch. He would be one of my front runners for most improved player of the year this year on the Houston Rockets. And as long as James Harden stays there, at least for a majority of the year, I see them being a 5 seed. John Wall was going to help the Wizards when he came back. Obviously, that's not kind of how we're seeing it play out. But I think ultimately the Houston Rockets are going to be a really competitive team again this year. And the West is tough. I mean, it's going to be close here between what we see as the 5 seed and the 9 seed. Is it possible the Rockets find themselves as an 8 seed? Sure. But I think as long as James Harden's in town, I find it more likely that they're a top 6 seed in the West. And to round out my top 6 seeds, I'm going to have the Utah Jazz at 6. I think with Donovan Mitchell taking another step forward, he's going to, prove himself as a true in and out all-star every single year in the West this year. I think he's going to come out and show that. They're going to have Bojan Bogdanovic back, a guy who's going to give them a lot of elite floor spacing, something they missed from the bubble. They almost took down the Nuggets in the bubble. Let's not forget that without Bogdanovic. Now, with him back, I think they're really lethal. They get that shooter. They move the ball around really well. They added in, obviously, they still have Mike Conley, Joe Ingles, and Rudy Gobert really is the name I haven't mentioned yet, but he's, if not the most important name, definitely the second most important name behind Donovan Mitchell, because he anchors that defense. Quinn Snyder's Utah Jazz have been a really good defensive team year in and year out. They obviously added Bojan Bogdanovic to help them on the offensive end, but Rudy Gobert is that paint defender, that anchor for that defense, and he, controls everything in the middle. He runs, the pick and roll really well as a hedge guy, able to take up a lot of space with that 7'1" height and 7'7" wingspan, I believe. And he's a monster in the paint. I'm really high on the Utah Jazz. I'm very confident they'll finish as a top 6 seed. Now, does it mean it'll translate to a playoff series win? No. And at this point, they'd be playing the Nuggets again. It would be fun to see that rematch. That was a really good series last year, so I'm looking forward to that. Now, moving forward into the 7 and 8 seeds. And the reason why I did the top 6 alone is because there's play-in tournament implications here. For the 7 and 8 seed, if they finish this way, the 7 seed would host the 8 seed for a game, and if whoever wins that game gets an automatic playoff bid as the 7 seed, okay? So they would be playing then the Los Angeles Clippers, whoever would win a matchup between these two teams, essentially, if this is how it plays out. And then the 9 and 10 also play a play-in game, and the loser of the 7-8 game hosts the winner of the 9-10 game. So that's a little confusing. I'll walk through that here in a second. At 7, I have the Portland Trailblazers. They're going to be healthy this year. Obviously, we saw in the bubble that they really had to turn things on to fight for that playoff spot, and they got there. But this year, with a healthy Yusuf Nurkic, hopefully a healthy Zach Collins, they improved their wing spot with Derrick Jones Jr., also brought in Robert Covington, an addition I really like there. You're looking at a more filled out roster, and it was hard for me to have them at 7. It's like them and the Utah Jazz, I was going back and forth a little bit. I think Gobert's kind of the difference there. But I really like what the Blazers have. Obviously, Damian Lillard's one of the best players in the league. And you're looking at a really completed out roster. You got Melo coming off the bench still. Hopefully he buys into that role. It sounds like he's going to. And now at this point, Portland is going to be a really competitive roster, and they're going to be a really, really fun team to watch this year. I see them as a 7 seed, not because of their own weaknesses, but just because of how deep the West is this year. And I have the Golden State Warriors at 8. This was also a really hard one to put. It's hard to not bet on a Steph Curry-led team. The loss of Klay Thompson probably took him out of a top 4 seed for me. I kind of saw them more where Dallas ended up finding themselves in my top 4. And now, with Klay Thompson out for the year on an Achilles tear, it's just there's going to be so much on Steph Curry's shoulders night in, night out on the offensive end of the floor. Obviously, they have Andrew Wiggins and Kelly Oubre, 2 really quality slashing threats. And I also really like the addition of James Wiseman as a screen and roll guy. But in the half court, it's kind of hard to see who's going to generate a lot of buckets for them outside of Steph Curry, especially from behind the arc. Playing into Steve Kerr's role as a coach, his system is very perimeter centric. He's looking to get a lot of guys down on pin down screens, running off the ball. And now Kelly Oubre is really not that type of guy. Andrew Wiggins hasn't been that type of guy. Obviously, Draymond isn't. And James Wiseman, maybe he could develop as an outside center at some point. But at this point, he's just not. So I kind of see some offensive limitations. Although I do think defensively they'll be a good team this year. So I have them at 8. Now, between these two, for example, I wouldn't know who to pick in a play-in game. It could be one of these two teams, but it would be really interesting. So for the sake of the argument, we'll say Portland wins so I can explain the play-in tourney. Okay, so then Portland's in the playoffs. Then Golden State would be hosting the winner of a game between these two teams, who at 9 I had the Phoenix Suns, and at 10 I had the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, again, it was really hard for me to leave the Phoenix Suns out of the top 8. They added Chris Paul, who I really like. I think he really impacts winning in a lot of ways. He's been underrated for years, in my opinion. And they obviously have Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton. I think that Paul is the perfect pairing with those two rather. And they form a pretty solid big 3 there in Phoenix. I think that, you're looking at 2 top 25 players in the world with Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and another top, 45 or 50 player in DeAndre Ayton. Gives them some real flexibility. I like Mikal Bridges. There are a lot. He's a defensive stalwart. I'm a little so-so on their 4 position with Cam Johnson and Dario Saric. I know they brought Saric back on $9 million a year. It's a good contract, but I don't know if I love that as their starting position. They also grabbed Jalen Smith in the draft to fill out that front court a little bit more. I'm a little so-so on that. Hopefully Chris Paul can stay healthy again this year like he did last year for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And in this situation, I do think the Suns would beat the Pelicans here, which would mean that they would play the Warriors. So it would be an 8-9 matchup for that final playoff spot. Hopefully that makes sense for you now. The Warriors in this situation would be hosting the Phoenix Suns, and then it would be a best-of-1 playoff game, which is really, really exciting. I'm looking forward to that. Those will be taking place May 18th through the 21st. So I'm assuming May 18th would be this game, May 19th would be this game, and then probably a day rest into a May 21 game. And at 10 here, I have the New Orleans Pelicans. It's kind of hard to say what I think about this team. They're going to be really strong defensively this year. Let's get that out of the way. Stan Van Gundy-led teams are usually strong defensively. They're going to work their tail off in practice. Eric Bledsoe is a really, really competitive defender. I actually kind of like that addition for them. Him and Lonzo Ball are 2 of the better defensive point guards in the league, and now they're playing on the same team. I'm a little nervous about their shooting. JJ Redick is their only real shooting threat. Consistently, Brandon Ingram really took strides as a shooter, but I don't know if he's, the guy you're going to be running pin down screens for. They're going to help off of Brandon Ingram a little bit. Zion Williamson obviously isn't that quite yet. They're going to be daring him to shoot, albeit he was rather successful in that situation last year. I don't know if that necessarily continues to be a trend going into this season. And Steven Adams is a non-shooter, obviously. So their offensive spacing I'm a little concerned about, but they're going to rebound the heck out of the ball. Steven Adams is a box-out machine. Zion Williamson's going to go fly for a lot of rebounds, and I mean a lot of rebounds. I wouldn't be surprised if he averages 25 and 10 this year. He's going to be an absolute beast offensively in the half court as a pick-and-roll guy with both Lonzo and also Bledsoe. And, they really improved their roster, in my opinion. Adams is a big improvement over Derek Favors. I also find Eric Bledsoe to be a huge improvement over the Nickeil Alexander-Walker minutes and also the Frank Jackson minutes. But I just don't know if it's enough in the West. The Suns got way better. The Blazers are healthy. The Warriors are going to be healthier this year. So it's just hard to see them making the playoffs. But I think they've made a lot of steps in the right direction. They're going to put Zion in a lot of competitive games down the stretch of this year. And that's really something important for his development, is getting in these close games, trying to close some games out at home and on the road. And it'll be really, really key for the Pelicans to just be competitive this year, whether or not that means playoffs. Now to my 11 and 15 seeds in the West. This is tough too. These are some good teams. Now, for me to say that they're not going to be in the play-in tourney, some of these teams, I think that they're talented enough to. It's just the West is so deep this year. I can't stress that enough. The Memphis Grizzlies really, really showed out. This might be the one that you guys in the comments are really upset about. I just don't see the Grizzlies really doing again what they did last year. I'm a big Ja Morant believer. I thought Ja Morant should, arguably be the first pick in the draft over Zion Williamson even. That's how much of a believer I was in him. However, The Grizzlies, they did add Desmond Bane, but I just don't love the Dylan Brooks as your starting shooting guard in the West. I just see that as a little tough. I really like Jaren Jackson Jr. If he could stay out of foul trouble, I'd be a lot more of a believer in the Memphis Grizzlies. And Valanciunas, he's so up and down. He gives you some really nice nights where he's, 17 and 10 on, 8 of 10 shooting. But then there's other nights where he just kind of isn't there. It seems like he gets 8 and 8, and he just doesn't have, an elite performance offensively, and defensively he's a little rough in the pick and roll game. He's a drop center, has some issues. That's kind of why I see them at 11. At going into 12 now, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves. First, some of the same reasons as the Memphis Grizzlies. They're a really talented team. Obviously, D'Lo and Cat will be fun to watch together. They brought in Anthony Edwards with the first pick, brought back Ricky Rubio, a move I really like. They were able to keep Malik Beasley. They're a talented squad. Defensively, they're going to be a little rough, okay? Anthony Edwards could be a great defender, but he just doesn't put in all the effort consistently on that end of the floor, something I'm a little nervous about. Kind of impacted my thoughts on him going into the draft. Also, D'Angelo Russell is kind of brutal in the pick and roll game defensively as a guard. He doesn't fight through screens well. It looks like he's lost out there sometimes when he's trying to hedge over or under a screen. And it doesn't work with Karl Anthony Towns, who's one of the worst pick and roll defending centers in the league. He's also a drop center despite being athletic. I don't really understand it. And I just don't think Ryan Saunders' offense is really the right fit for Minnesota. I think that they need to go into a heavy pick and roll situation offense with D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns. But instead, they're going to be running Ryan Saunders' motion offense. It's able to get a lot of people involved, which is nice because now they have Ricky Rubio to kind of facilitate and run that a little bit more. But I don't know if I see Rubio as a starter, more of a six-man role. So it's just going to be kind of tough to see what their offense really looks like. I don't think they're going to maximize the talents with Ryan Saunders as head coach, and I think this could possibly be his last year as the Minnesota Timberwolves head coach. Now into 13, the San Antonio Spurs, one of the greatest head coaches of all time in Greg Popovich. Him and Phil Jackson are probably the top two in a lot of people's eyes. And I have them at 13 here, even though I love their addition of Devin Vassell in the draft. And I think that, DeMar DeRozan is one of the most underrated players in the league. I just don't know if they quite have enough, firepower. I don't like LaMarcus Aldridge for a lot of the same issues. I was just harping on Valanciunas and Karl Anthony Towns. Aldridge struggles defensively in a lot of different ways. He's kind of growing out of that power forward role with today's NBA, being a little bit more athletic, a little bit more speed and quickness on the perimeter. So you almost have to play him as a 5, but I think Jakob Poeltl is best suited to be their starting 5. So it's kind of hard. The offensive fit I don't really love. DeMar DeRozan's a great player. I'm really high on him compared to where everyone else seems to be lately on DeMar DeRozan. But overall, I think that the Spurs are just going to struggle a little bit this year. I just don't think they have enough shooting. I think LaMarcus Aldridge kind of holds them back into that, mid-2000s type of basketball and just doesn't, really help them. If he stepped out to the three-point line a little bit more frequently, a little bit more consistently in the pick and pop game, I think he would function a lot more offensively. But defensively, there's just so many limitations that he has at this point of his career, and it's kind of hard to see the Spurs overcoming that. Into 14 now, I have the Sacramento Kings. I really like the Tyrese Halliburton addition. They lost Bogdanović. I understand it. It was going to be tough to bring him back. I don't blame them for not matching that. And now you're kind of looking at a Buddy Hield, De'Aaron Fox backcourt combo, which is something I think that should have been the starting combo for the past few years. I didn't understand the whole Bogdanović starting thing. I even thought that maybe Hield and Bogdanović could both start. Obviously, the Kings didn't feel that way, moved Hield to the bench. That kind of created a mess. I think they'll be a little bit more structured this year. I just don't like Luke Walton as a head coach. I don't like their front court too much. Marvin Bagley, is going to be forever known as the player picked right before Luka Doncic. Something that's not really going to work out super well for his career, honestly, in a lot of ways. And they're just kind of limited. They don't have, a whole slew of shooters. Obviously, Halliburton can shoot it and Hield can shoot it. But De'Aaron Fox is a streaky shooter a little bit. Bagley doesn't stretch the floor. Rashawn Holmes is a nice center, but I just don't know if they have enough, especially on the interior, to deal with some of these other teams ahead of them. And the Oklahoma City Thunder, I don't think they're going to be as bad as everyone's saying, actually. I know I have them last in the West, but I don't think they're going to be brutal. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to be a 20-point-per-game scorer. Al Horford's going to be much better this year than he was last year. everyone likes to blame Al Horford for Philly struggles, but I think Philly was part of Al Horford's struggles, honestly. I think that it just wasn't, really meant to work. He went there because of the pay. I don't blame him. He got the bag. But now looking at the Thunder, he's going to get to move back to that true center role. No Joel Embiid there to kind of eat up the lane next to him. And I think they're going to be competitive this year. I don't think that they're going to be good, but I think that they're going to win more games than a lot of people are saying. People are shooting them in as the number one pick lock. I don't really see that. I think there's some teams in the West and the East that they're for sure better than still with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on their roster. And obviously they've got a whole bunch of assets, so the future is their priority. I wouldn't be surprised if they do move Horford this year. But as long as he's on their roster, I think you have a solid 1-2 combination to at least stay right around kind of where the Kings find themselves, probably a few games behind them. But overall, still an okay team, and it's kind of tough to rank some of these. I feel bad about the Grizzlies being at 11 and missing the play-in tourney in my situation here. But it's going to be a fun season to watch. Maybe I'll be wrong. Let us know down in the comments below who you think are going to be the top 10 seeds specifically. I'd love to see who you think is going to come out in the play-in tourneys and who you have the number one seed as. Thank you guys for watching. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more of our content here, as we'll be talking about the NBA pretty much exclusively here for the next week or so. And we'll catch you guys in the next video.